Welcome back to the Mountain Morning Show, where I am very happy to have Mitchell James Power here, who's the curator of the Natural History Museum of Utah. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Joe.
Terrific to have you here. We misidentified that as Utah Museum of Fine Arts, but this makes a lot more sense to talk about the Natural History Museum with a geologist, as opposed to talking about fine art. So welcome, Doctor. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
All right, so I've got lots of questions, and I am really excited. We're talking about poisonous plants. We're going to talk about some pollens. We're going to talk about, I've got some things that I want to know about.
Okay.
This is going to be fun.
Okay.
Are you ready for this?
I hope so, yeah.
Okay, first of all, you and I were talking off screen a minute ago about pollen.
Yes, yeah.
And pollen in soil.
Right.
You guys can find antique pollen,
fossil pollen.
Fossilized pollen.
Yeah. So part of my research lab at the museum, we take these sediment cores. So we drill down, and then we chemically digest the soils. And when we're lucky, we find pollen that's been preserved in the soil from thousands and thousands of years ago. So we can recreate a forest or a plant community from 1,000 years ago from these ancient records. So,
in theory, then you could go around a location, like let's use strawberry as a great example. I think, because you guys, I know you're into that giant plant, the tree up there. Right. What do they call that tree?
The aspen clones.
The aspen, yes.
Yeah.
So you have that up there, and I'm imagining that if it weren't there, you could go in and take soil samples from all around where it was, and probably identify that there was a large thing there once.
Yeah, yep.
That's what we're talking about.
That is, but of course, strawberry, they artificially impounded it 100 years ago. Yes. So we only get 100 years of sediment record at the bottom of that lake.
Right.
So we go to some of the really old lakes, like Utah Lake.
Sure.
I have a record from 28,000 years in Utah Lake, and so we can look at the history around Utah Lake and what plants were there. We can look at during the woolly mammoth period and what were woolly mammoths eating around the lake. And so it's pretty cool. Yeah, it's like a CSI of natural history.
I'm telling you, it's amazing. Yeah. I could just see you guys at the microscopes going crazy right now.
Oh, it's really fun.
You loved mud pies when you were a kid, didn't you?
Well, I had my share of them.
This is awesome. Yeah. Okay, all right. I want to talk about some of these the plants, because that's scary. There's some plants out there that are not good for us.
Yeah. So I brought in some local stars here, celebrities.
Some celebrities.
And these are plants that I chose because they grow right around here. So they're in the foothills, they're in the Wasatch. So this first one, so this is a typical herbarium specimen.
All right.
So we try to keep them flat so they don't fall off.
I'm going to lean it just a little less than flat here.
This one is 1944. So it's collected quite a long time ago, but it's in the carrot family. So those of you that like celery or carrots, you may be slightly concerned to know this is poison hemlock.
This is poison hemlock.
Poison hemlock, and so poison hemlock, those that follow Socrates, was the death of Socrates back in 399 BC.
He ate this and died.
There was an infusion given to him for his impiety. So this was one way to knock off people.
This is for real. This would kill you.
Yeah, this would kill you if concentrated at high levels.
Okay.
And so this is actually from Europe. It's not a natural plant in our Western environment, but
it's been here.
It's been introduced, and now it's naturalized. So it's around in streams and not healthy for cattle and horses to eat as well.
Oh wow! So essentially an invasive species.
Yes, exactly.
All right, this brings me to the question I wanted to ask you right out of the gate. The Russian olive tree.
Yes.
Yeah, the hated Russian olive tree.
Yes.
Now, I've heard that this was also not a native species. In fact, I was told, the story goes, something to the effect of the pioneers moving across the plains were given it as a gift, but it was not a gift, it was a gift, right?
Yes.
Is there truth to this?
These stories are hard to prove or disprove.
Right.
Because of lack of email chains, if I can use that. But I've heard a parallel story, which is that it was brought in as a windbreak in some of the western farmlands to try to cut down the wind from, And of course, it's so successful here
Yeah.
that you don't have to maintain it or water it. It just takes off on its own. So.
Yeah, and it is an invasive species, essentially a weed.
A weed.
It eats water like crazy.
Yes. Yep.
Cuts off waterways. Pretty nasty.
Yeah.
Pollen from it makes
yes.
looks like me sick, which is why I know this story. It's crazy.
Like the Siberian elm tree too.
Right.
I mean, that's another one that's a lot of us are allergic to, and thanks to our, whoever introduced it, we have it in our landscapes.
That's why this becomes like when people get a little whacked when they're going through checks at different states, and they're asked, "Or do you have any plants with you?" Right? And these plants, really, what does that matter? It's a big deal.
It is a big deal, and I use this idea called the 10s rule, and that it's like 10% of all plants brought in have a chance to survive, and then 10% of those might actually become established, and then 10% of those become really obnoxious weeds.
Right.
So it's a small chance that you get a new invader, but they do arrive.
But look how good those Russian olives are doing.
Yeah.
Oh boy. All right, what else
so
do we got?
We've got, this is another favorite of mine. This is called death camas.
It looks like an onion.
It looks like an onion, and therein lies the problem. So it's related to onions. It's in the onion family. It's flowering around May, so you'll see it in the foothills. And the sheep love to graze on it, but it's highly poisonous. And so
to sheep too?
Yeah, to sheep.
So do they die from it typically?
They usually get stomach problems. Yeah,
Okay.
and humans who are out, camping or traveling out in the wilderness will find these and pull up the bulbs and boil the bulbs for an onion dinner, and that's bad news.
I'll say.
Because the onions, the bulbs on these are really poisonous. So
oh boy.
Not necessarily going to kill you like the poison hemlock, but it will ruin your camping trip. So, this is a really common one in the
Stansbury Mountains out by Tooele.
Yep, that one was collected in. Yep, and you'll find it right here, Round Valley and Park City area. So,
wow. All right.
So then my fourth or third poisonous plant.
Yeah.
This is we call it monk's hood.
I've heard of this.
Some people call it wolfbane.
Okay.
And this one, it's a really pretty plant. It's got these beautiful purple flowers, and it's around the foothills here, but the cattle will graze on this. And something like a pound of dried root is enough to kill a horse.
Oh, wow.
So you don't need too much of this to make you really sick. And I found some old journal entries of ranchers saying how their a few cows would just fall over, and they couldn't get the cows back up on a cattle drive. And often it's probably because they've been browsing on this plant, this monk's hood.
This becomes, we talk about what cowboys have to do. It's a lot more work than a lot of people realize, because they're not just keeping the cattle rounded up, they're making sure they don't eat bad stuff.
They've got to know what the forage is and what they're eating. And but there's a long history of this plant. It's been used in Western medicines, and it's been used in witchcraft, and it has positive and negatives like all poisonous plants, right? Yeah. And so it's been used for acute throat infections, and so there are some potential good applications for some of the toxins in these, but often when they're just not well known and they're browsed on, they cause negative problems. So.
How about that? And you mentioned witchcraft, which brings me to another topic which I'm very excited to talk about. But I think this is a great time to take a break here on the Mountain Morning Show. We'll come back. We're going to talk a little bit of witchcraft and plant use in witchcraft, as well as some other plants that might not be too good for you, right after these messages. Welcome back to the Mountain Morning Show, and I've got Professor of Geography, Dr. Mitchell Power, here in our studio, and we are having a great time talking about some plants that you may or may not know existed here in Utah. And one that we're pretty excited about here in a minute is a species that you've heard of, but you didn't know we had our own, and I'm excited about that. But first, I wanted to catch up on a story that I mentioned here on the show, the wheat that was found in Salem, Utah, that turned out to have a fungus, the ergot of rye, which caused the Salem witch trials, they believe, in Salem, Massachusetts. Right. Kind of weird that we find some of these things, and they were going to eat it.
Yeah, and we find them in our own backyard.
Right.
I mean, that's the funny part. Yeah, well, I think it speaks to the bigger picture that there's a lot of toxicity out there. And,
just don't eat things that you see laying around.
Ask an expert or try to do a little research on it. Yeah, to find out, because you could be in a world of hurt if you grab something and think it's a snack.
We found a couple that are definitely in that realm, and one from witchcraft, which is pretty exciting for sure.
Well, and what we might call witchcraft historically may be a future medicine of choice. Today, yeah.
And that's not far out. That's actually been the case in some circumstances.
The Western yew tree, which has got Taxol, is now being used to stop cancer cells from growing, and so there's lots of interesting things going on.
That brings us to a point we should probably talk about for a minute. As we chop down the rainforests, and people are doing that rampantly, we're losing plants like this, some that may be the ones that do save our lives.
Yeah, and unfortunately we have no idea of the diversity that we're losing because of the rate of deforestation.
Does that scare you?
It really does scare me, and I do work in the tropics, and I've been doing research down there for years, and I see it with my own eyes, and it's really about trying to document as much as we can, as quickly as we can.
Wow.
And it's not just documenting, a plant species, but it's documenting the alkaloids and the chemical compounds and
all the things in the soil that it needs to survive, right? You got to figure that out. Yeah. Because the potential, right? I mean, you guys are you still working on an arc? Is that still? I know scientists are always talking about this.
I gave up on that a little while
ago.
Did you? Yeah.
Okay.
But I think what's pretty neat about all of this diversity in the rainforest and the tropics is that it's really tied to the insects, because the insects are out there eating all of these species. And so if you can't move, how are you going to protect yourself?
Right.
You develop some nasty chemicals. So many of the tropical species have alkaloids in them.
Wow.
And so when things, I actually brought in a little tropical butterfly here. This is a blue morpho.
Oh, so beautiful.
Kind of a celebrity in the tropics.
Yeah.
But it has high toxicity levels because the plants defend themselves. It's the only way to keep the predators, at bay, is to build your chemical resistance.
And this guy has some.
He has some. He's not as poisonous as a lot of the others. The monarchs and viceroys. They have higher toxicity. I mean, think of the monarchs. They eat milkweed. Have you ever tried milkweed?
It's awful.
It's awful. Yeah. So imagine that concentrated in an insect.
Wow.
So there's something like 500,000 insects out there that are just specialized in eating plants. So all these plants are trying to protect themselves.
Amazing.
So that's where they get all these tricks.
I love how great you make science. This is so much fun. This is a reason to go, if you never thought about going back to school for a minute, go take some classes at the University of Utah, especially in some of these areas. I love, there's some in birding, there's some in plants and geology,
and of course,
geography.
The Natural History Museum is a nice segue to get into a lot of those topics. But I brought one.
What's this one?
One more here that I think most folks are familiar with and might fear.
I'll say.
This is our wonderful species of poison ivy.
If I touch this, will it still give it to me?
Probably.
Yeah. Okay, I'll make sure.
So this actually is a local species. So this is not the eastern poison ivy.
No, local. It's ours.
It's ours. It's it grows in the Intermountain West. And so the big difference is, you see the three leaves, or we call leaflets.
Right.
So that's classic poison ivy.
Leaves of three.
Leaves of three.
Let it be.
Let it be.
Yeah.
But this one is more shrub-like. So it'll grow, 3 feet, sometimes even 5 feet tall.
Is it usually this color, or is this
it'll have a shiny red. It has like a waxy leaf color to it in the summer. And so the eastern poison ivy is more of a vine.
Yeah.
So that one will climb up trees, but this one it's fairly ubiquitous around here. You'll find it in all of our drainages and streams and any wet spots. Has urushiol is the chemical compound that is the oil that has like an acute dermatitis effect on most of us. So when you break out in blisters and are quite miserable from this guy, it's the urushiol in the under the cells, and they're really fragile leaves. So all you have to do is just brush the leaf, and it cracks open those cells, and the oil starts to come out.
Oh boy!
And and I've had experiences of having it on my laces and taking those boots out 6 months later and having it all over my hands. So
really,
so you really have to be aware. And this time of year, there's just stems. There's no leaves.
Wow!
So
that's crazy. I would never have guessed that. That's some scary stuff.
At the museum, we have a special exhibit that's just opened, The Power of Poison.
Right.
And The Power of Poison highlights, some of these plants. It highlights the history of medicine and how medicine was used to cure various ailments. It talks about Macbeth, and it talks about Socrates, and some of the ancient mysteries. And visitors can come in and try to solve some of these mysteries too.
Wow.
What happened to the death of patient X, and you have to figure out why that person was killed off.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
So it's a lot of fun. And the other big thing that's coming up at the museum is our behind the scenes event, which is Saturday and Sunday, this 12th and 13th, 10 to 4:30, and it's the one day a year we open all of the collections to the
public. Yeah, you can go and open drawers, right?
Yeah, you can go in, you can see insects, you can see lots of animals, you can see birds, you can see dinosaurs.
Wow.
You get to walk through the collection rooms, which are normally just open to the researchers.
Yeah.
And so we open this up kind of as a gratitude to the public, and it's pretty fun. I spend the weekend talking to close to about 4,000 people, and it's my favorite weekend of the year, because everybody has a different question.
Yeah.
And
these are people who are fascinated about it too. There's a reason they show up.
Yes. Yeah. And it is really a lot of fun. And I think that the neat thing, what I like is it's the interaction with the staff and the public that most people take away as a real positive. It's the objects are neat.
Sure.
But they're just the beginning of a conversation.
Talking to experts about it and what it can do
and the public, they're experts too. Like, people are out there and having experiences and understand things that many of us at the museum have never thought about before. So it's a really neat dynamic of learning.
Probably gives you guys some ideas.
It really does, yeah.
Sparks some imagination between the two.
And we have something like 1.5 million objects, and I think 3,500 are on exhibit in the galleries.
Yeah.
So this is the one weekend you can actually go and start to see some of those other objects. So,
oh my goodness.
So it's pretty neat, yeah.
Wow, it's certainly going to be a great time. I can be certain of that. I want to thank you so very much for being here. We were just passing Halloween. I bet Serpent and the Rainbow, that's one of your favorites?
Yeah, it's up there.
Favorite Halloween movie?
Yeah.
If you don't know, that's talking about some of the plants that we use for anesthesia, among other things.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Pretty neat, yeah.
Oh, this is fascinating. I want to talk more. We come back another time?
Absolutely.
I'd love that. Bring some more scary stuff
and
some plants that we're probably familiar with. I suppose would be good too.
Maybe some edibles, huh?
Let's do that.
We'll focus on edibles.
Can we, in fact, maybe we could do somewhere we could eat a couple here in the studio.
Yeah, as long as there's a restroom close by.
We'll make sure.
Okay.
Dr. Mitchell Power, again, from the University of Utah. He's a professor of geography, and you'll find him at the Utah Natural History Museum. Thank you so very much.
Yeah, thank you, Joe.
All right, the event, again, this is coming up?
Yep, on the 12th and 13th, 10 to 4:30. It's regular admission, and it's going to be a blast.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll see you then.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you so very much. We've got more coming up here on the Mountain Morning Show. We're talking turkeys right after this.